Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description.
Hello everybody. One of my favourite things in the world of motoring is the bold purchase. Now they go by many names. Pistonheads calls it the brave pill. I call it the automotive siren. You know the kind of thing I mean. That car which is often very beautiful, sounds great too, and often has an alluring badge, but you just know is a disaster in disguise. This is the kind of car that you think about all the time and wish you would buy, but you know there's a very good reason why you haven't. And in this category, you will find all sorts of things, like old Alfa Romeos, Maseratis of just about any vintage, and of course, this, the Jaguar X100 Generation XK, a car that on launch gave Jaguar a bit of a shot in the arm, a beautiful blend of retro styling with modern performance that really helped popularise the modern day Jag. However, we all know that underneath lurks an ancient platform, and now, almost 30 years after the car was launched, it sits in that most perilous of positions. Very cheap to buy, but very, very expensive to run. Question is it worth it? Well, find out in today's episode of JayEmm on Cars. Like a great many automotive sirens, the origin story of the X100 XK is the stuff of legend. It all began back in the 1980s. Burke of the Week award there. Idiot. I'm a biker. That stuff pisses me right off. That's how you die. Anyway, friendly face back on. Like a great many automotive sirens, the origin story of the X100 Generation XK is the stuff of legend. The kind of fact that every pub bore likes to bring up. And it'll start a little bit like this. Ha! Didn't you know that old XK is really just an XJS underneath? Yes, we all know. Likewise, we all also know the story of the fact that TWR, having raced the XJS to some success in the 1980s, developed the platform and then tried to sell it to Jaguar, who said thank you, but no thank you, possibly on account of the fact they were broke by the XJ220's total failure, and instead took it to Aston Martin, turning it into the DB7. Jaguar then soon after going, yeah, actually, could we have that please? And so they built the XK8. It launched in 1996 and did an extraordinarily good job of disguising the fact that underneath this was a then already 20-year-old car. Now get in it, and there are a few subtle clues, like the fact it is very, very tight. This is the convertible version, I'm sure the eagle-eyed of you might have noticed, and I'm pretty confident my head is above the line of the top of the windscreen. Now, just a few days ago, I got to drive a 1964 E-Type, the car the XK was clearly built to evoke. And I think there wasn't much less room in that. Now, the big difference is that this has 2+2 seating configuration, that being an early E-Type was a strict 2-seater. However, that +2 bit, it's optimistic at best. Handily, you did at least get a half-decent sized boot, particularly for a car of this type. And up front, you did get something fairly new, an all-aluminium 4-litre 32-valve V8, which made 290 horsepower in launch guise. Torque was 290 pounds-feet, that's just shy of 400 Newton meters, and when combined with a 5-speed ZF automatic gearbox, the only one available, and a curb weight of over 1.7 tons, that made the car good for a 0 to 62 dash of, are you ready, 7 seconds. Not exactly spectacular. Something remedied by the XKR, which landed in 1998. And to that 4-litre engine strapped a supercharger, giving it another 80 horsepower for a total of 370 and a lot more torque, 384 pounds-feet. And that dropped the 0 to 60 time considerably and made the thing all round a lot more muscular feeling. A few visual tweaks accompanied it as well, and today it is often the XKR that people talk about, leaving the entry-level XK8 often a little bit forgotten. Truth is, though, it isn't a car that deserves to be forgotten, and there are an awful lot of reasons why you might actually want to seek one of these out over the R. Chief amongst them being the fact that both of them were very cheap for a very long time. You could argue they still are. However, the R is the one that was going to appeal to the sort of person that just wanted cheap power. And that is not a recipe for care and consideration. Though tempering that is the fact that Jaguar have always struggled with their image as an old man's car. And here in the XK, I don't think they did quite enough to improve it. The later car, the all-aluminium X150, I think did a slightly better job. But today, this one to me still feels very much old school Jag. And in a lot of ways, that's a very good thing. This car is a 1997, the first year the convertible was available. So it is as the car was launched, meaning you've got these tombstone style seats with integrated headrest, plenty of leather and wood throughout, and I've got to say, it feels in a very, very good condition. And it's not owned by an older man. It is in fact owned by a young lady called Laura. Now previously she had a Renault Clio, then migrated to a Rover 25 and found herself rather in love with the fact it had leather and wood in it. What she didn't like though was the car's reliability problems. For her next purchase then, she got an XF. Started then taking it to a number of Jaguar Enthusiast Club events and kept seeing these. So decided she fancied a taste of that XK life. She picked this up last year for the princely sum of £5,000 and to date has spent over £7,000 on it, including £4,000 for a gearbox rebuild, quite a bit to get the coolant hoses that run through the middle of the V sorted, and of course various other items too. And it has to be said that in spite of that, she might still be able to consider herself lucky, because there are plenty of XKs out there which have had not just those problems, but many others. Being built on a now 50-year-old Jaguar platform, of course, rust is an issue, as are electrics and just about anything you might care to imagine. In the early days, these developed a reputation for one very specific issue. Like quite a few cars at the time, Jaguar used Nickel in their engine liners. That, combined with the high sulfur fuel of the day, then meant that many of the engines failed. However, now that is not something I would worry about, and by and large, the engine itself is a pretty good thing. The gearbox, though, I've never been quite so fond of, and the last time I drove an XK, it was an XKR coupe, the one you'd think would appeal to the petrol head. It was a later car too, with the 4.2 litre for 400 horsepower and the 6-speed ZF. The thing is though, even that just didn't feel particularly dynamic. There is no real way of choosing gear yourself. Though I know it has the famous Jaguar J-gate here, all you'll actually ever do is tell it the maximum gear it can go into. There is a sport button down here, which I have now pressed, and that in theory will let the thing rev out a little bit more readily. But this has a no limited slip differential and very rudimentary traction control. My overriding memory of that last trip was the fact that the car would do what it wanted when it wanted, and it alternated rather frustratingly between giving you nothing at all and then everything, making it a car you felt like you just couldn't quite trust. Happily, today we have the last of the British summer, and so out there it is bone dry. The car is also sat on a set of fresh rubber, Continental Contact Sport 7s. So, with that in mind, let's try and put my foot down and find out what the old Jag is like. Do you know what? I'm actually quite enjoying this. Now, somewhat obviously, this is not the powerhouse that the supercharged R is. However, the performance is much better than you'd think for a car with such a lowly 0 to 62 time. Try and override the gearbox, put it in one of its manual-ish modes, and it does actually do quite well. Bury the throttle, and you'll also get a fairly nice noise out of the thing, though this is still on an entirely standard exhaust and is fairly muted. The handling too, with the standard fit for the convertible Jaguar computer active technology suspension, well, that is clearly set with comfort in mind. Do you know what? I'll give it some credit. Plant your foot even in drive, and if you've got sport engaged, it really will let you rev it out. That's not so bad. I also hear I'm just that little bit less worried about the thing overwhelming its rear tyres, which in the R just aren't really big enough for me to be able to trust it. The brakes do work, though the pedal takes a bit more travel than I would like, and in all honesty, you do know if you were to try and push the car, they'd be a weak point. Happily, I've not got much interest in trying to push it. The steering actually has a little bit more weighting and texture to it than you might expect, though it is still on the light side. Of course, it is old school hydraulic steering, but set up for the elderly buyer. So if you're expecting a race car feel, prepare for disappointment.
A special thank you to today's sponsor, NOVE Watches. A small company run by fellow petrolheads, NOVE produces Swiss-made wristwear at affordable prices. And for a JayEmm exclusive discount, use my code in the description down below.
Tragically, you may also recall that Jaguar did have plans to build an even sportier version of the car, the XK8R. It made an appearance on Top Gear, though if you looked closely you would see that the thing had many problems and didn't run right. But the idea of this with a more aggressive suspension setup and a manual gearbox, ooh, that'd be quite special. Sadly though, 'twas not to be. Almost certainly killed by the higher-ups at Ford, who wouldn't have wanted Jaguar to have one-upped their sister company, Aston Martin. Truth is though, and I was speaking to Laura about this earlier, one of her dream cars is a DB7. This is better. The DB7 is the better looking car, and inside the DB7 does feel very special, but it's still got plenty of dodgy cheap switchgear in it. This actually I quite like. By being earlier one, it doesn't have the later optional screen which formed your sat-nav and so on and so forth. The 3 dials you got instead, I think, far more timeless. I also think Laura has been a little bit of a genius here by buying the car in convertible guise. Now it just so happened that when she was on the hunt for this, she also decided that she fancied to go in a convertible. And because she was looking at these and they were available as a convertible, that's the one she wound up buying. Now for myself, it's always been the coupe that I've lusted after. These with the roof up, like most soft-top convertibles, they just don't look right. And particularly for something like the XK, which has such a distinctive side profile, well, the convertible ruins it. Now the counter to that is that with the roof down, and particularly the windows down, and the tonneau cover in place, it looks magnificent. Very evocative of that old E-Type. However, I was always wary of the fact that these, even as a coupe, are not the most rigid thing. And I always worried the convertible was going to be virtually unbearable. I needn't have worried. Yes, there is scuttle shake. I can see it in the camera over there, and I can feel it through the seat. But it is nowhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be. To give you some reference, I don't think it's really any worse than, say, a 986 generation Boxster. Certainly far, far better than just about any Maserati convertible I've ever driven. And that is another reason I think here the XK8, not the R, is the one you want to buy. This because it has less power and is softer set up. That convertible chassis just isn't stressed quite as much. And this car benefits, as every convertible does, from the fact that when the conditions are right, the weather is on your side and the road is good, life is just better in a convertible. And I think it's even better in a convertible Jag. I wouldn't want a manual in this. I think it would go against the ethos of the car. In an XKR, I'd be crying out for it all the time. Here, the whole thing just works. And on paper, if you'd made me choose, I would say this is the last XK I'd want to buy. As it happens, it's the only XK of this generation I think I'd want to buy. But is it worth the risk? Yes, they're cheap. In fact, they haven't really appreciated much at all over the last sort of 10 years. You can pick one up for as little as £2,500 to £3,000. Sometimes even less if you're willing to be brave and buy from the likes of Facebook Marketplace. Allegedly good examples start at more like £4,000 to £5,000, but even so, as Laura has found out, they can still be hiding some pretty significant problems. And this is just not the kind of car you want to own without an AA membership and a friendly garage. The good news is that Britain is awash with Jaguar specialists, from the likes of YouTuber favourite Tom Lenthal to Paul Roach in Sudbury, which is the garage that Laura uses, located in deepest, darkest Suffolk. Though, with prices of them still being somewhat depressed, I would steer clear, I think, of a full resto project. Unless there's something really particularly special about it, any car that needs significant bodywork or rust repair, I really would want to avoid. But buy one that is in apparently decent cosmetic and mechanical condition, set aside a good amount of money for potential trouble, take it to a specialist, get it looked over, do a few bits of preventative maintenance, and I think what you've got here is a beautiful classic Jaguar that you can still use as a daily should you want to, for not much money at all. Even the tax is cheap, because this one's older. It's only £345 a year, which is nice. Insurance is cheap too, because it's a classic car, and they were relatively safe for their day, with the new Ford Tib-style key, made extra secure for the Jag. Though do bear in mind that means if you need to get one cut, it can be a bit of a pain. I like this car an awful lot. Just don't try and get in a race with a Boxster in it. You will lose badly. But it's okay, because you'll lose with style. For you, sir or madam, are driving a Jag. Anyway, I want to say a big thank you to Laura for bringing her car out, and as ever, to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.